Hi everyone and welcome to our latest episode of Future Work World Podcast. My name is Barry Winkless, CSO of Cpl and Head of the Future Work Institute.
And I'm Elysia Hegarty, Associate Director at the Future Work Institute.
And throughout the show we'll talk about a range of topics around this thing called work.
And we'll interview experts to inspire you to make changes to better improve work and life. So to kick off each show, we will discuss a trend or an insight that we find interesting for the future of work. Barry, what have you got for us today?
I have got the democratisation of work tools. Okay, it sounds fancy, but really it's about reorientating technology and other tools to require less specialised knowledge. So a tool is thought to be more democratised when more people can master it without advanced training or knowledge. Now, I always like to give an example of stuff like this to make it a little bit more tangible. And, you know, probably most people out there have heard about the Whoop wearable. And the Whoop wearable really is really a professional tool, but given now to the hands of you and I. And it measures things like, you know, biometric data that until recently only professional athletes would have had access to. So that gives you a good example of this idea of democratizing tools, you know, professional tools put in the hands of amateurs. So if you think about all the way from music production, right? So I literally now can produce my own record at home if I want to, thanks to all of these amazing tools that are much easier to use. And until relatively recently, I would have had to spend a fortune. I would have had specialist training to do all of this kind of music production stuff. And it's not just about that. It's about how we develop websites now. You know, literally any of us can develop a website within an hour or two, whereas before it would take a lot of specialized knowledge, specialized coding to make that happen. And then all the way through to this idea of low and no code development, right? I know we'll be talking to our guest, Gavin, later on about that, right? So, you know, this whole idea of putting more and more sophisticated tools into the hands of you and I, ultimately to make us more innovative, more efficient, more creative, you know. So I think it's a really, really interesting space. And one of the areas I got really interested as well is it's not just about the, you know, the obvious stuff. It's also about things like citizen science, right? So for example, social platforms are now enabling professional scientists to access amateur scientists, you know, in big programs of work, right? So, you know, I came across a platform called Zooniverse that enables everyone to take part in cutting edge research, right, in many fields across the sciences and humanities. So, you know, I think there's a lot of stuff that now, you know, people like you and I can get involved in. You know, this democratization is real, you know, so if anybody out there thinks they want to do some random project that they don't think they have the skills for, the chances are there's a platform that will help them get there. You know, you want to produce that album, the chances are you can do it relatively easy. If you want to create that website, tools are probably there. If you want to actually start coding, there's probably platforms out there that will help you become a coder in a relatively short period of time. Not an expert, you know, not a fully fledged professional, but will get you into that zone. So I think it's really, really interesting for anybody listening out there. If you've got that project that you really want to get stuck into, you don't think you can do it from a technological perspective, chances are the stuff is out there to make you more professional.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I love your examples, particularly the one with the Whoop or the Whoop, whichever way people want to pronounce it. But as you know, my husband runs his own gym and has a fitness centre, and he works with a lot of clients, and Whoop is one of the key things that enables him and his clients to really excel. So they could be doing anything from strength and conditioning, they could be training to, you know, improve their golf swing or, you know, tennis. But really for the individual, as you say, it's putting that into their hands that they can understand what's my recovery, what's my speed, what's my time, how, you know, how have I been, my level of exertion as such. But also it enables my husband as their coach to also be able to review that data as well. And then he can guide them through, okay, this is the next stage of your program and the next. So it can enable the individual, but then it can also enable others as well to improve their services and things like that as well. So I think it's a huge market, I think. Yeah,
and anybody out there can have a look at what their kids are doing on some of the platforms that they're coding. You know, very simply, and they're creating games. You know, so you know, it's that idea of recognizing that these tools are available and really tapping into them. You know what I mean? And I think that's why I love this whole idea of democratization of these tools and getting those things in the hands of people. You know, I remember if you really go all the way back to the likes of Apple, they really were the first organization that said actually, you can have very professional desktop publishing tools at home. They're really the first company to start thinking like that. And, you know, it's interesting where we are now. They're really, most businesses are thinking about how do we give access to people for these tools. So I think it's a really, really interesting trend, and it's going to bring us into all sorts of interesting places. You know,
definitely. Super. Thank you. So now we move into our interview section, and today Barry and I are speaking with our very own Gavin Fogarty, CTO at Cpl Group. Welcome, Gavin. So Gavin, tell us a little about your current focus at Cpl.
So I think always 1.5 eyes on growth, I suppose, but current macroeconomic conditions, it always makes sense for anybody strategic to think about how they can use tech to be more efficient, optimize, tidy everything up. So it's quite a lot of effort across the board in CPL at the moment to do that, and just make sure we're on top of things. So a lot of recording, reconciling, figuring out exactly where we stand with tech, and kind of getting ready for scale, getting ready for that next level of growth.
Gavin, AI. Okay, everybody's talking about it. Lots of bits and pieces. You know, supposedly everybody's using AI. A lot of smoke, often not an awful lot of fire. What's your current views on AI and how we can use it in the workplace, our own and beyond?
I was worried about you asking me because I'm on record.
Yeah, exactly.
No pressure.
I just want to make sure I have this down.
It's an interesting one because you never know where you are on that kind of innovation hype curve until you have hindsight, right? So that's probably one of the reasons I hate saying it on record, because eventually something I say is going to be totally wrong when we look back on it. But I think the general consensus is that we're at that kind of peak of excitement place. Which side of it? Not too sure. But I think a trough is coming, and I think that reality is going to set in for everyone when they start to realize that the real commercial gains are not as tangible as we all thought they were going to be. I certainly haven't seen any sign yet that this is going to be majorly disruptive for our industry. But what I'd say as a caveat to that is this rate of change hasn't been experienced with any other tech before. I certainly haven't seen it in my lifetime, and that's, I suppose, what both excites me and scares me. We genuinely don't know. So all that anyone can really do at enterprise level at the moment is make sure that we're incredibly well informed, that we're not being an ostrich and putting our head in the sand and kind of ignoring it, that we're doing everything that we can in terms of innovations on the AI side, Gen AI side of things, to make sure we're on that bleeding edge and we are kind of primed and ready to pounce if the real ROI starts to become incredibly apparent. And there's a couple of areas already that we've used it that have been super successful. So what I mentioned earlier in terms of kind of reconciling and just making sure we're on top of everything, it's been very useful for helping kind of understand how all of our employees and all of our team members use tech, what tech they're using, things like reading contracts, understanding the small print of those contracts with regards to the tech that we're exposed to, making sure that we're totally on top of anything with auto renewal, stuff like that has been amazing. But other than that, there's a couple of kind of cards up our sleeve that I don't want to get into yet, but very exciting stuff coming. And look, we really hope that it will transfer then to be kind of customer facing, and some of the solutions that we can offer will be more AI driven than they currently are. But yeah, that's all I'm willing to say on camera.
That's okay. You've passed the test, Gavin.
And look, you've come from predominantly a startup background and everything that goes with it. How do you maintain and foster an entrepreneurial mindset in an organisation, and why do you think that's important?
I was worried about the opposite. You know, I was worried would the startup guy fit in with enterprise.
Right.
But I think that the truth is I've always been a bit of a mutt. I've always been a bit of both in kind of everything I do. So look, it's all about exposure. I try and still attend as many startup events as I can. I try and spend as much time on calls with my startup circles, my founder circles as I can. I speak with and meet with the VCs regularly. Really, I think if we start to become disconnected from that mindset, it's very hard to get back into it. And the bottom line is it is quite different, but super lucky in CPL because it's a company full of entrepreneurs. They may not kind of identify always as that, but they are, whether it's because we acquired companies and that entrepreneurial mindset stayed and those founders stayed, or because people find themselves in the talent industry because they have that like commercial hunger in them. You know, they're always thinking about the next thing and the way to do it better. So really, it was a nice transition for me to still feel like I'm surrounded by those people.
So you're an intrapreneur, really, isn't that what they call it? Entrepreneurs within an organisation.
Throwing out the phrases today.
Yeah, that's it. You know,
very good. Yeah.
Just trying to sound smart.
Add that to my LinkedIn.
Yeah. Gavin will talk about that now for the next two days. Gavin, just on that, look, you know, I know you're particularly a big believer in getting technology, getting the tools in the hands of the business, right? And we hear a lot about this idea of citizen developer. I know you're a strong proponent of that. Talk us a little bit about that. Talk us a little bit about, how that creates value in your own opinion.
I think it comes from kind of past traumas. I say that from tongue in cheek, but like a lot of the startup failures I would have had, and I know a lot of other entrepreneurs had, was because you have that field of dreams mindset. If we build it, they will come. And I was a Lego kid. I just wanted to build stuff all day long. You get obsessed with building and you start to think, all right, well, if I just make it perfect, people will use this thing. It always failed. And the reason it failed was because I just was completely excluding what will people pay for. And now I'm the total polar opposite. I just want to start with, okay, what will people pay for? Ideally up front. And if I have enough people paying for it, well, then I'll think about, can this be productized and can it be turned into software, or should it be a technical solution? So with that in mind, if we look at the people who are best at doing that, they'd often say that they're not technical, and that they kind of feel excluded by it because technology, like the legal industry or sometimes the finance industry, it's exclusive. They use big words. They make us feel silly, and that is because it is complex, and not to belittle it, all of those industries are difficult and require a lot of study, including tech. But technology has this lovely movement now where we're starting to democratize it. We're starting to make it more simple, more accessible, and some of the more complex advanced technologists in the world are now spending their time building tools to make tools so that you don't have to be technical. And there's something really exciting about that for me. If I can get to those kind of commercial, let's call them geniuses, because they are, they're definitely better than me at it. They figure out how to make money faster than I can. And if I can just make tech more accessible for them, teach them how to kind of automate more of their processes without having to learn how to code or learn the language or join the club, that's really exciting to me. And Gartner produced a report 3 or 4 years ago suggesting that by, I think, 2028, I can't remember the exact, I'm paraphrasing, so don't hold me accountable here, but they suggested that something like 60% of new softwares would be built by kind of low, no-code entrepreneurs, if you like. And again, that's not because they're going to start to build all of the software. It's that the rate and the volume of software being produced will just go through the roof because so many of us can now build it. So yeah, we've got some interesting and exciting things happening here on that front. More to come.
Awesome. And in your view, how sophisticated are the low to no code platforms out there, and how would you recommend our listeners could start their own journey towards no code skill development?
They probably have already and don't often realize. So if we think 20 years ago, we wanted to get a website built, we had to go to the agencies. It costs a fortune. They would tell us complex things that we didn't understand, and we basically handed over the money and just had to say, yeah, okay, like dealing with the builder of your house, you just have to trust them. That's different now. We want to build a website tomorrow. You go onto Wix or Squarespace or whatever it is, and you build it in an hour, and you don't even really realize that what you're doing is a no-code UI and that there's code being generated on the back end. So they're probably doing some of this already. But on the point of sophistication, they're rapidly evolving, and they're infinitely more sophisticated than they were even 5 years ago. In particular, some of the kind of if this, then that process automation tools. Think of it like the glue between applications. So anything that makes one application speak to another application in an automated way. And most of the kind of top tier sales teams now in companies that wouldn't be, let's say, held back by a lot of red tape or bureaucracy, they'd automate a lot of their workdays. I have a friend who shall remain nameless, but he famously told me...
Friend X.
Yeah. He'll know who he is if he ever listens to this. But he famously told me that as a top performer salesperson in this tech company, quite a large one, he was spending about 40 minutes a day of his 8-hour day actually working, and the rest was in process automation. And he was telling his superiors this, and they were delighted with it. They were turning it into automations that they were rolling out across the rest of the sales team. And it was because a lot of his work was possible in terms of ability to be automated. So the if this then that tools like Zapier, etc., are a great place to start. Very sophisticated. Obviously, I wouldn't suggest rolling it out in an enterprise without certain controls. But on a personal level, just starting to play around with it like you would Lego, that's a great entry point.
I think it's a good, like, you know, one of the things I've learned over the last few years myself is a few years ago I went on my own VR journey. I was like, look, I want to get interested in this immersive tech stuff, you know, and what amazed me actually was how sophisticated I could get relatively quickly. You know, you get platforms like Unity and all of a sudden you're realizing, I hadn't done this a few years ago. So I think there's something in, Gavin, what you're talking about, and that idea of no code, low code. It's so accessible now. For me, it's part of that, the discussion we had with a previous guest around inclusivity around STEM.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing STEM. They're doing tech development, don't even realize they're doing it, and actually take a step. Take a step in there. It'll be a bit messy at the start, but actually there's a lot of tools out there that can, make us fairly sophisticated in terms of what we're doing,
Dive in. It's like the Irish language. I was having this conversation with someone the other day. It can sometimes feel intimidating, especially if people are so fluent and you don't want to go to the groups and start using the tiny few words that I do have. But if you don't do it, you don't start. And with this sort of stuff, the whole concept is to just continuously democratize, make it more accessible, more easy, just less barriers to entry for people. I think it's starting to click. And what's really exciting to me is if you look at some of the high potential startups, even coming out of Ireland, they are by default building in no-code editors into their software. So there's a really great gaming company that you and I both know the founders starting at the moment, and a huge part of their offering will be rather than producing a game, they're producing a platform for people to build games with their friends. And that's a real kind of seed change in thinking about what people want next.
Yeah, and there is still a fear, and I know you said about like people potentially putting their head in the sand, and I think there are probably some organizations who are like, I don't really know where to start, but we know we need to do some sort of digital transformation, but we don't know where we need to start and what we need to do. What would be your advice for those kind of organizations?
Yeah, look, it's exactly the same thing. It seems remedial, but it is get started. You can't just continue to hide from this. It is inevitable and everybody needs it. The entry points are kind of wide and varied, and so many people will lean on the kind of blue chip, let's call them, consultancies as a point of entry, and it's not a bad starting place at all. It does make sense for so many people, and a lot of our customers will be doing something similar. But there is something in the kind of more boutique approaches that often the specialist consultancy agencies will just be able to unlock it a little bit faster. And not for a shameless self-plug here, but with regards to the future of work.
Thanks, Gavin.
That's why we specialize, right? Because we do know it, and we do know where the kind of cross between technology and the future of work is, and it's one and the same now. And that's why that specific brand of our business does that and that only, right? Rather than trying to be everything to every person. So I think starting off with getting advice in the door from one of those consultancies is always best. Ideally, our one.
I was going to say it couldn't end in a better way than that. So Gavin Fogarty, CTO of Cpl Group. Thanks very much, Gavin.
Thank you. So this is the part of the show where we share an artifact of the future, and this might be a concept or a physical item that may exist over time. So Barry, what have we got today? I have
a slightly selfish one for you today, Elysia, because I wrote an article about this a few months ago. So in a way, it's part plug, part artifact of the future, and it's the concept called metaworking. Okay, so this really is around the seamless integration of what I call the three realms, right? Physical, digital, and virtual working to improve creativity and productivity, optimized to the most appropriate work types, right? So again, if you think about it at the moment, we're working in that hybrid world. This artifact is all about seamless integration, and I call 4 types of work, right? Process work, so this is repetitive work with high levels of task similarity. So a lot of, crunching type stuff. Project work based on delivering small or medium-sized projects. Purpose work related to building culture, collaboration and engagement of teams, communities, or social sustainable type work. And growth work related to developing skills, knowledge acquisition, micro-learning, etc. Now, switching from the 3 realms based on work types, on a typical working day for a process technician, for example, could look like, doing some augmented based process work, for machine diagnostics. He might then switch to a virtual learning session for growth work, ended by a physical culture and engagement meeting with their core team at the end of the working day, all rounded off by a virtual meditation to clear his head before heading for home.
Wow.
So metaworking, the seamless integration of 3 realms across 4 different work types. It's an interesting artifact.
That's
for the future.
A really interesting artifact. And I know we talk about these as being like potentials for the future, but this one feels like this could be something people could implement really easily tomorrow.
I'm selfish on this one. This is a bit of an article stroke plug for this one, but it's our show, so let's do it.
Super, thanks. So thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, please hit subscribe and head over to your favourite podcasting platform to listen to more.
And don't forget to go to futurework.world, where you can download best practices, interviews, and lots of insights about the world of work. Thanks, guys.
Bye.